Right, good morning everyone and welcome to today's live lesson. And today's live lesson is going to be on writing and punctuating dialogue. Because as you know, every little piece of grammar we look at in these lessons is usually to do with something that's going to come up in your progression test or in your actual exam. So you need to know all the little bits and pieces of grammar that will help you. And this is one where, believe it or not, people still lose marks because they honestly either forget, their mind goes blank, or they had no idea in the first place how to punctuate dialogue and how to do a decent bit of dialogue writing. So let's take a little look at the document. Right, let's begin by looking at writing and punctuating dialogue. Right. You are busy writing an assignment and you want to introduce some dialogue. And unless that dialogue's realistic and effective, you will lose marks because you're making blunders all the time, putting a comma where there shouldn't be one and not putting one altogether, etc. Putting punctuation outside speech marks. Remember that dialogue can act as a means of moving your story along. How many times have you watched a movie and it's like there's no writing in there to tell you what's going on? It's more about, wow, whatever the characters are saying, it's showing you their character and it's showing you how the plot is going. Okay, right now, some tips on how to write dialogue. Okay, these are simple tips. The first one, of course, is never include greetings or small talk in dialogue. I mean, how boring would that be if you said, hi, hello, how are you? Oh, I'm fine, thank you, etc. What a waste of the words. You might not have enough words to do that sort of thing. And it's very boring for the examiner to read these. So never include greetings or small talk in dialogue. And secondly, don't waffle. Keep the dialogue short and to the point. You avoid overlong dialogue. You don't need to go into big explanations when people are talking. It's like need to know basis. If it's about revealing something about the character or revealing something about the plot, don't waffle on about, oh, you were wearing a nice blue shirt the other day and blah, blah, blah. No waffling, okay? Right, the third thing, you're going to have usually at least two characters in your story. So they mustn't sound the same. Each must have his or her own unique voice. Meaning, look at number 4, be consistent with the characters' voices so they address each other in a similar vein all the time. Maybe you've got one who's cracking a joke, one who is gloomy, etc. So they shouldn't sound the same because you can't say every time, said Janet, said John, said Janet, said John. You want your writing to be much more interesting than that, okay? You're not in the baby class anymore. Then once you've written the dialogue, one thing you should do is read the dialogue aloud to yourself. Does that sound crazy? No, read the dialogue aloud to yourself. Why? Is it natural? Is it realistic? Or does it sound fake with no emotions? Go to the kitchen and bring me a coffee. You know, really, if it's going to sound bad, you need to rewrite it. And remember what we said? Keep it short, to the point, and need to know basis with no waffling. Okay, so that's some little tips on how to write simple dialogue. Now here's something that people seem to get wrong, the basic rules for writing dialogue, which people don't seem to know. Every time somebody speaks, you put that writing on a new line. You don't squash it up on the same line as if there's no more paper on the planet. No, every time a speaker speaks, they must get a new line. Even if your character is just saying yes, no, go away, he must have his own line. Okay, so that's very, very important in writing. Otherwise, it's just confusing and it doesn't look good either. And the second basic rule is all punctuation goes inside the quotation or speech marks. When someone is speaking, the punctuation must go inside the speech marks so the reader can understand how the dialogue is actually being verbalized. E.g., maybe it's a question, maybe it's an exclamation, but all the punctuation goes inside your speech mark, whether you're using single inverted commas or double inverted commas. Okay, so that's your two basic rules. Each speaker gets a new line, and all punctuation must go inside the speech marks. Right. What on earth is a dialogue tag? Dialogue tags. There's an example for you right here. There's your dialogue. I am so thirsty. She croaked. Right? So that verb we're using is a dialogue tag. Excusez-moi. So every time you are going to use a dialogue tag, it could be anything. She said, whispered, bellowed, screeched, replied, stated, concurred, answered, cried, shouted, suggested, disagreed. All these things are synonyms for the word said. You should have a full list of synonyms for said, which is probably a whole page's worth because there's so many different ways to say said. As I said, you can't keep saying he said, she said. You've got to show something in that character. She cried, he shouted, she screeched, bellowed. You are showing us something about the person and the plot by doing that with your dialogue when you write it. So the dialogue tag merely means how the person speaks or she said. So dialogue there, the dialogue tag. That's what it's known as, okay? Right. Probably the people who are supposed to be, who don't really know this, aren't looking in. Punctuating dialogue. If you've got a little question, rather put it on the webinar or on the Zoom chat at the moment, please. Right. If you want to punctuate with an exclamation mark, look at this box. I'm saying, don't do that. Okay. The speech marks go before the sentence starts, a capital letter, and in this case, we've got some punctuation. The punctuation is always inside the speech marks, so the exclamation is inside there, and you close your speech there. Okay, so with an exclamation, that's exactly what you do. Look at those red arrows to remind you, and try not to ever forget that. Okay, now let's say if you've got a dialogue tag, you need some speech marks before the sentence starts, obviously, and a capital letter. Number two, the punctuation, of course, again, is inside the speech marks. And a lowercase word after dialogue when you're going to put in your dialogue tag. Okay? Don't do that. He shouted. Look at the red. It must be a small letter, not a capital letter. Okay? So that's with your dialogue tag. He shouted, he screeched, he screamed, etc. You must have a small h when you've got the dialogue tag there. Now let's look at it with a question mark. Are you going to do that? He asked. Again, obviously, speech marks, capital letter before the sentence starts. Punctuation always inside the speech marks. And thirdly, again, lowercase, as it's all part of the same sentence. Are you going to do that? He asked. So it's a question mark this time, not an exclamation mark. But again, it's inside the speech marks. Always inside. Right, a few more to go through. Maybe the dialogue tag comes first, which is what most people tend to do, but it gets a bit boring, doesn't it? She screamed, and the comma comes before the speech marks. Okay, because this is part of the sentence. Then you start your speech marks, capital letter, don't do that, exclamation mark. The punctuation's inside, inside, always inside. So if your dialogue tag comes, get a comma there. It's the only time it's outside there because it's nothing to do with the sentence. It's to do with the description. She screamed, comma, don't do that. Okay. Oh, goodness me. Right, dialogue with action. What does that mean? Let's look at this one. Are you sure we should leave now? She closed the window to keep out the howling wind. Maybe we should go tomorrow. Okay, so we've got dialogue, and in between what this lady is saying, we've got some action. She closed the window to keep out the howling wind. So again, speech marks obviously in capital letter as you start off your dialogue. Are you sure we should leave now? Question mark and close inverted commas. And that's the only one sentence. It's not going to continue. So you're going to write some action now. So you start a new sentence. She closed the window to keep out the howling wind. Then she says something else. Maybe we should go tomorrow. Okay, punctuation again inside the inverted commas. And the speech marks before and after for her new sentence because we already closed them there. So that's speech marks, dialogue with action. Okay, that's how you do it. She's saying two totally different things. They're not related, and that's why they go in two separate sentences. Right, dialogue with action or thought between the dialogue. We just looked at one there. As usual, we've got the speech marks before the sentence starts and a capital letter. Are you sure? And then we've got an M dash. M dash, these are called. Because that is part of the description. It's not part of the dialogue. So are you sure? Close inverted commas. Dash. She looked daggers at him. So he's in trouble by the sounds of it. And then another M dash, because again, as we said, that is the description, not the dialogue. She continues her sentence, that, small letter, because it's still part of the first sentence. Are you sure? She looked daggers at him, that we should leave now. Okay, that's quite a tricky one, but it's very good to put that because you can describe what the character's doing, how that character's feeling. Is the other character she's talking to totally oblivious of what's going on? You know, you can make it mysterious. Are you sure? Looking daggers, that we should leave now. Same dialogue, just continued over there. Okay, this is how you help your reader visualize the scene as it plays in your own head. You're writing the essay, you visualize what your characters look like and what they say and how they say it, and you've got to try and get that through to your reader. So by using the right vocabulary, it's going to make a big difference rather than said, "Are you sure," she said, "that we should leave now?" Which one has got a more powerful effect on your imagination or on your visualization? Okay, think about that. Okay, even when this character has some inner thoughts, it's very difficult to try and get inner thoughts out when you're writing. So this is exactly when you can do it, in the middle of dialogue. Okay, right, here's some dialogue being interrupted. Again, you've got an M dash, but just one. "Are you bonkers?" And he was going to go blah, blah, blah. But the other person spoke up quickly, "Don't call me bonkers." So, "Are you bonkers?" Whatever he was going to say. So you've got an M dash inside the quotes because the interruption is part of this dialogue. So you open your inverted commas, close them, and then the normal sentence dialogue continues on the next line because somebody else is interrupting. So there you've got to start with a capital letter, obviously. New dialogue, speech marks, "Don't call me bonkers." All punctuation inside the speech marks. Okay, so if someone's interrupting you, there's usually a good reason for it. It's something to do with the plot or the character that you're creating. And that's when it gets interrupted. Now, here's two sentences with a dialogue tag, all slightly different. They seem kind of similar the first time you look at them. But if you want to get this info here, I will send it to you gladly. You can tell me on Zoom here or on the CambriLearn web chat. Dialogue tag between two sentences. "You shouldn't have started any trouble, comma, because she's going to continue talking. She muttered," lowercase, because she muttered to her husband. "I think you should just have gone home." Okay, because we've got the dialogue tag, we've got the comma inside the speech mark, and then she says another sentence, "I think you should have just gone home." So you just open the quotation marks as normal for her next sentence. All right, "I think you should just," punctuation again inside the speech marks. Always inside. Okay. So that's between two whole sentences with the dialogue tag. "You shouldn't have started any trouble," she muttered to her husband. "I think you should just have gone home." Right. And then finally, we've got some dialogue between paragraphs. Okay, this might be the end of the paragraph, and then we're going to start a new paragraph with that particular sentence there. "Are you sure we should leave now?" she asked. "Maybe we should just go tomorrow." And in this particular case, you don't close the speech marks if the same person's going straight on to speak in the next paragraph. Okay, this is quite a complicated one because she, whoever she is talking, and that was the end of paragraph one. Paragraph one. Then she was going on to paragraph 2. And we open the speech marks to show she's still talking. "Let's go and visit Jane as well. It would be so good to see her one more time." Okay, the next paragraph has capital letter and speech marks as usual at the beginning. And you close the speech marks when this person stops speaking as usual. All punctuation inside. Joe thought about this for a while. So this is going to be another paragraph, and we're going to blah, blah on about something else. Okay, if somebody would like this sent to her, let me make a note of that. Send. Right. Okay, that's just a brief look at some of the ways to punctuate sentences and how you should be doing it. It looks quite complicated, but once you know the basic rules, new lines, everything inside every bit of punctuation inside the speech marks, it's not so bad. Exclamations, dialogue tags, question marks, dialogue tag first instead of after the sentence, dialogue with action in between it could be very revealing, could help with your plot. Dialogue with action or thought between the dialogue, using an M dash as it's called. Remember, part of the description rather than part of the sentence. Interrupted dialogue, one M dash, close your inverted commas. Dialogue tag between two sentences. Dialogue between paragraphs. And basically, you don't need to do much more than that. This is what you're going to use very, very seldom if it's between paragraphs, unless you're writing a very long story. Okay. Right, if you know all that, you cannot go wrong. Okay. Let's look a little bit at how to write dialogue that is realistic and effective. How can you make it realistic? Great dialogue's hard to get right. Something we do in here every day, knowing what to make your characters say in order to move the plot forward and increase intrigue isn't easy. Remember, sometimes you've got to involve tension or intrigue, mystery in your writing. And you can do that by just having someone talk, What you need to do is ask yourself the below questions, and you read the dialogue aloud to yourself. Do people actually speak like this in real life? Okay, that's the first thing. Is it real, your dialogue? Okay, or is it all fake? We mentioned that a bit earlier on. Is there any point in having the dialogue unless it moves the plot forward or develops the character? So we know if the character's heroic. Is he a slob? Is he a happy person? Is he a gloomy person? Is what you're writing easy to say? Or are you fumbling and stuttering over the sentence? Do you pause in certain areas because there's no comma, that you might have left a comma somewhere out of your dialogue between a compound sentence, something like that, and then it doesn't quite make sense? So that would mean that it doesn't really happen in real life. You do pause when you have to, because you have to make an effect, make a point. Okay. Now that's the same as that one. Is it easy to say aloud, or does it leave you stuttering and stammering like I just did there? These two are very similar. And sometimes, just to try and prove that it's realistic, you can record yourself reading the dialogue on your phone or wherever. Does it sound like the characters you originally imagined, or does it just sound weird? Okay, so that's going to be the opposite to something being real. It's going to sound weird. Right, character development. As we mentioned, that's what the dialogue can show. Does one character speak in short, factual sentences? Does another character wax lyrical and waffle every time he speaks? He beats around the bush. He doesn't get to the point. He goes on and on and on. This difference is important because then your reader can actually distinguish who is speaking without saying John said, Jack said, Jill said. You can just write these sentences if each person has a character. Characters' words should be consistent. So again, you're working on that character. Perhaps every sentence they say begins with or maybe he says like, yeah, like this all the time, like, or maybe he calls the hero number one. So make sure they have a little catchphrase perhaps throughout the essay just to distinguish your characters when they're speaking. All right. Then finally, try to show what your character is really like through dialogue. You want your person to be strong. You want your person to be heroic. You want your person to be smart. You've got to show that through what they're saying. Okay? Character development are about their views on events or people. So what they say about someone else, what they say about an event that's just taken place. It's just like when you meet a new person. First of all, you start discussing subjects in common or subjects in the news, and that way you can decide whether you like or dislike someone. Even though it's just a brief encounter, it gives you some sort of impression. So you need your character to make an impression. Okay, so your dialogue should do the very same for your characters. Okay, and I don't think we've got, yeah, we think we do have time for 1 minute. 3 common dialogue mistakes. Do not repeat the character's name all the time. Hello, Jake. How are you today, Jake? What are you going to do today, Jake? Some people tend to do that, but it's not a good thing to do. And that's why you try to show different characters by their different speech patterns. Okay, so the same thing with dialogue tags. Have that bunch of synonyms there that you can use for the word said. Then your writing is going to be much better. You'll get more marks because you've used synonyms. You'll see that's in all the marking criteria everywhere, in your exams or otherwise. Okay? And then don't keep using the same dialogue style. Don't keep saying he said it at the beginning. He said, she said, he said, we said, they said. No, get your dialogue at the back end of the sentence or in the middle between 2 sentences, etc. Now you should know how to do that. Okay? So you want nice, interesting dialogue, and you want to be able to punctuate it properly. And that way your marks are going to be flying high instead of flying low. In fact, yesterday in a progress test, somebody got 6 out of 50. Oh, it was awful. So he got 12%, which is not so good. Anyway, so hopefully, guys, that helps you a little bit with your punctuation of dialogue and how to write dialogue more precisely, making it more interesting. Okay, so if you get any questions, queries, comments, let me know. Also, let me know if you want that particular information. Okay. All right, guys, thank you very much for joining us, and hopefully see you next time.